Hey, WordPress people. Welcome back to the WPMRR WordPress podcast. I'm Joe.
And I'm Christy.
And you're listening to the WordPress Business Podcast. Christy, we're switching it up a little bit at the beginning of this episode. Instead of the what are you up to, we are going to do what are you hiring for? So Christy's got a few job opportunities at Liquid Web that she's going to give quick shout outs to. If anybody out there is looking for a position at one of the most advanced, innovative, potentially gets to work with Christy, or at least at the same company as Christy. If anybody's looking for positions out there, here are a few opportunities. So take it away, Christy.
Hey, it's career day at WPMRR. And if you go to liquidweb.com/careers, you can see all the job openings. And yes, perhaps you can get a chance to work, probably not with me, but definitely like parallel to me. And then we can interact and stuff. And we can be like, oh my gosh, WPMRR. So there's a lot of stuff going on. We are looking at hiring account executives, account managers and business development managers. Now, if you end up applying for one of those jobs, you will likely interact with me a ton, because I lead most of our product team efforts on learning and understanding the product. So those are roles that are open right now. And we've got other Liquid Web job openings open, such as data center technician and support technician. So by all means, check out liquidweb.com/careers and see what we're looking at.
Excellent. Few career opportunities at Liquid Web, a few career opportunities at WP Buffs too. I've had recent meetings with leadership team, and my apologies, these are not up on the website yet, so don't go to the website to look to apply now. But at some point they will be. We're doing some more planning for 2021. So we're really thinking about big things we want to do next year. And we're starting to get those rolling now. So before, this is like you get the early news here before they're even up. But the two big positions we are looking for are, one, an SEO. This is most likely a full-time position, but could be a part-time position. Help out WP Buffs and WPMRR.com with the SEO of those sites, but also someone who is really familiar with client work and scaling client work. Someone who knows how to do all the audits and knows how to, do some sales around it. Someone who knows how to obviously run successful SEO campaigns and has a proven track record of doing that at scale. We're looking for you. So most likely this person's probably like a freelancer or working out on their own. Maybe you're working at an agency or something, but you're looking for your next opportunity. This may give you some folks some hints into some of the things we're thinking about offering at WP Buffs in 2021, but I will say no more because we're still putting some of those projects together. So if you're a talented SEO, if you are looking for a new opportunity, come and talk to me. Email me, hit me up in Slack. Come find me. Other opportunity we are hiring for is I don't know if this is I call this like a senior WordPress developer or like here's who you are. You're someone who has a lot of WordPress agency or freelancer experience building websites for folks. You've built every kind of site under the sun, and you still want to keep doing that. You want to build websites at scale, but you don't want necessarily to be the freelancer. You don't want that roller coaster revenue. You're looking for a place where you can earn a full-time salary and be pretty comfortable and keep building a ton of awesome websites. May also give some folks some ideas of what we're thinking about doing at WP Buffs next year. But again, we want to find the right person for that kind of position to help kind of in an entrepreneurial role, like head up that piece of the business and maybe start building some websites at WP Buffs. So come and talk to me. Those are the two positions I'll throw out right there. I guess third, designer. I'm sorry, I don't have as much information about this position. We need someone who can bring everything we do together into one really solid design. We have this new rebrand come out at WP Buffs, which is great. And we continue to build on that and have all our design be centered around that, all these cool patterns and textures people have seen around WP Buffs. That's all there. But we need a designer to really be in charge of that instead of us kind of probably scrambling around a little bit and building this on Canva or building that in Photoshop, and it's like we need a designer to really like streamline that process for us. So if you're a designer and are looking for opportunities, I would love to talk to you as well. So hit me up. Those are my 3, Christy. So that's it.
So a graphic designer specifically. You want someone with
Yes.
the nuts and bolts skills of
Graphic
producing
designer,
visual assets.
digital designer. Yeah. Not, I don't know. If you want to make some nice, cool like t-shirt designs for us too, I'm not going to say no. But yeah, the main position is going to be digital. It's that, and potentially maybe some client design as well. So yeah, graphic designer.
All right, got it. Cool. That's
Cool.
why I was asking. It's like an experienced designer. Well, folks, you heard it here first. Jobs opening at WP Buffs. I don't know. As far as how I'm doing, there's not a lot going on. It's a big holiday in the U.S. next week, Thanksgiving, but we're still under pandemic and varying degrees of lockdown. So
yeah, are you doing anything, or you're just kind of sticking around?
I'm hanging out.
Austin?
Yeah, I'm just sticking around Austin. And yeah, I don't know. It'll be nice to just like have some downtime and keep on going with this weird year.
Yes, yeah. Let's close it out. I don't know. It's like I want to close it out, but 2021 is gonna. Who says that's gonna start much better? So but I agree. Let's closing the chapter on 2020, and I'm fine with that. Same with me. Thanksgiving plans. I am doing Thanksgiving with the family, but it's very close family only. So there's only like 6 of us, including Mo. And yeah, Sterling and I are going out tomorrow. It's Friday now, so we're going out tomorrow to get tested, get results by Tuesday or Wednesday seems to be the average. So we should get our test results back and do I guess like a distanced dinner with folks, and a small one. And then yeah, Christmas, we're still kind of, I guess, still playing a little bit by ear now, but I mean, we've kind of already decided we're not doing the big family Christmas thing this year. We may head down to Texas to see some people, but man, cases are really going up right now, so it's a pretty stressful time to like think about traveling right now. Even though there's some evidence to show that flying is actually pretty safe, it's still, with cases going up, just the chances of like running into someone who's COVID positive is a lot higher, and you don't want to catch it, and especially like pass it along to someone else. That's the worst. Or many other people, that's the worst case scenario. So I'm going to try and be safe, and yeah, hopefully get through it.
Yeah, it's challenging, but this will end someday too.
Someday.
And it's been a while since we sat to record, because I looked at our updates from last time and I was like, wow, those sales training I was doing were a long time ago. And our world has had a lot of like interesting shocks to it in that time. And then both of us are in the US, so certainly our country. And I ordered this Joe Biden life-size cardboard cutout, and I was gonna have it in the background here. I was gonna have like Joe in the background.
Christy and 2 Joes. That's a new podcast.
Yeah. That's right. But he's still in the mail. Other Joe is still in the mail. So
next time.
Next time. I felt really ridiculous ordering my cardboard cutout of Joe Biden, but I had this gift card to allposters.com from Chris after I moved to Austin. And it was like, okay, like here are the posters I want and stuff, and for like $30 I can get a Joe Biden cardboard cutout, and like certainly over the next 4, maybe 8 years I'll get at least one kick out of that. So but yeah. And I think it led us into thinking a lot about how to do an episode that is relevant to our listeners, but acknowledges the current time that we're living in.
Yeah.
Right, Joe?
Totally. We kind of talked off air before we started, and we're deciding, do we want to do a politics episode or something more related to politics or more in parallel to politics than we usually talk about? And it's hard because we want to just talk about things that are really like specific to WordPress and building your business and stay true to that. And because people are getting inundated by news all the time around politics, right? And especially right now. But we thought that there was line we could walk down the middle, talk a little bit about the political situation, but also talk about how you can use that potentially, or how it could potentially damage your business, your subscription business, anybody listening. So, what we want to talk about today is, should your business be political? Subscription business, one-time business. We can talk a little bit across the aisle there, but I guess talking a little bit about being political as a business, and how, one, that I guess that could potentially hurt your business, like there's contexts and situations where that could hurt your business, or two, maybe contexts where it could actually help your business. So we want to try and be we want to try and make it pretty tangible in that sense, but also just talking about, like, the main question, is it a business's role today, anytime, to be political? And I know, Christy, you have a lot of opinions about these things, as do I. So maybe I have in our show notes here about this story that I saw on Twitter, that actually Sterling sent me on Twitter, about Expensify. Should I start there?
Yeah. I think it's so interesting. Expensify, I just want to say, because if anybody that listens to this podcast also follows me on Twitter, you all already know what my opinion on this is going to be. Expensify, 5 stars. Way to go. Classic
Okay,
move.
nice. I follow you on Twitter, but I'm not on Twitter very much. So I was about to say, I don't know your opinion on Expensify, but apparently Expensify. This episode is sponsored by Expensify. 5 stars. Sterling sent me this tweet. I forget when she sent it to me, but it was probably a couple weeks ago. It was before the election. So the tweet is: Scoop after their boss emailed the company's 10 million customers saying vote Biden. Expensify employees have been under attack from fake customers and bots. But what's interesting, employees say the email has fortified their decision to work there. And so I won't go into the entire article, but the main point of the article is to say that the CEO of Expensify decided to email 10 million customers saying to vote for Biden before the election. The CEO shared a Google Doc, I believe, or some sort of shared doc with every employee there, so that they could co-create a letter together, everybody, no matter who you were supporting in the election. And they definitely got a good amount of blowback on it. And really, to see the effect of churn, they'll probably have to see, over 6 months or a year even, because people have to take time to switch away from Expensify. That may not be an immediate solution or immediate thing they can do. But so far, they haven't seen a lot of churn from it, from a customer standpoint, so it didn't negatively affect them financially, except for obviously some people attacking them on Twitter. But the main interesting part of the story was what I thought, that they gathered feedback from all their employees, and a lot of people who were more conservative, or I guess voting for President Trump, to reelect President Trump, actually said that this didn't negatively affect their opinion on the company or wanting to work there. We could talk more about, like, is that feedback legitimate? I think a lot of people will probably say the buttery answer. Maybe that's true. But from the feedback that they've gotten so far, it seems that it's brought folks at the company more together, which I thought was an interesting conclusion to that. Maybe not conclusion, but short-term conclusion to this saga. This is on businessinsider.com if anybody wants to go through and read the whole story. And maybe we'll share this tweet or the link to the story in the show notes. But I thought that was interesting. Kind of, it's a good place to start, I think, for our topic today, because this is a business that has nothing to really do with politics, at least not directly. And the CEO took a political stand and urged 10 million of their customers to vote for Joe Biden for president. And so, Christy, what do you think about that? You liked Expensify before this. You saw this, and you gave them 5 stars. So, how many stars now are you giving them?
I think that this news story is a great place for us to start this episode, because it encapsulates a lot of the little items that we're going to touch on, right? One of them is this idea that, yeah, Expensify maybe on the surface doesn't have anything to do with politics, but at the end of the day, right, like when we're managing the way that we do payments, when we're managing the way that we track expenses, that is political. Making sure that economic opportunities exist for everybody, that things are simplified for the most marginalized people in society are political stances. And so that kind of access matters. Something that I think is really interesting that we'll talk about some more is that Expensify is probably the kind of company that could get away with this a little bit easier than other companies because that product is just not very elastic, right? Like if Expensify sends you an email telling you to vote for the guy and you were going to vote for some other guy, you can't be like, well, we're getting off of Expensify the next day, right? You'd have to redo your entire invoice management system. And so I think that definitely plays a role in the type of safety that's created. But on the topic of safety, the results about what's going on with the employees don't really surprise me because we know, we say over and over and over that we have happier, healthier, more whole, and more productive workplaces when employees have the sense that they can bring their full selves to work. Right? If there is a significant part of yourself that you're withholding at work, you are more likely to also underperform. You are more likely to blow deadlines. You're more likely to just not be fully psychologically engaged. And when we talk about diversity issues at work, we're talking about these things because we know that they affect the bottom line. It's not just like a feel good fuzzy thing. So I think it's interesting. Certainly, I'm sure that the CEO thought there's going to be some blowback, but the benefits outweighed the costs, and the factors for why that was the case in this story track as far as I can think through the problem on this sort of 2-minute examination.
I agree with you on all those points. I think it's interesting pointing out the fact that Expensify has certain responsibilities as an invoicing company around certain politics. If someone is, I don't know, invoicing someone in something related to like human trafficking, like that's clearly an issue that probably it's Expensify's responsibility to take care of. I'm not saying that that's true. This is totally an example I made up off the top of my head, but that would be something that I think it would fall to Expensify to say, like, is this the kind of business I want to support the finances of? Just like it is for WP Buffs. What kind of WordPress sites do we want to manage? It's the same thing. So I'll take my own example of someone else and apply it to myself as well. Some people in the past, I think, have touted the benefits of not being political in their businesses. A pretty famous example is Michael Jordan. I say a pretty famous example. I really learned about it when I watched The Last Dance on Netflix now. If people want to learn some awesome stuff about Michael Jordan's like two different three-peats of championships. But he was pretty adamant about not being very political and not supporting certain political candidates, famously a black political candidate that everyone from where he grew up, that people thought he should have been supported, more outspoken about. And his quote, I may be misquoting here, so the general idea of the quote was, Republicans buy sneakers too, or conservative people buy sneakers too. And he was being somewhat protective over his Nike sponsorship and his finances and the finances of the businesses he worked with. And I think there's obviously a trade-off to wanting to be more political. And especially in a situation like that, there could be negative blowback, especially if there's with someone such a huge footprint across so many different kinds of people. Like everyone likes Nike. Like I haven't met a lot of people that are like, Nike sucks. Like a lot of people like Nike. Like no matter what your political beliefs are, like people want to have good sneakers to for brand recognition and to play sports in, right? So like that's something that's not as political, I think. And then there's also the idea of not creating, potentially creating issues among employees. I agree with you that I wasn't super surprised by that Expensify thing. I think if you have a strong culture, you can have conversations around these things and not have them explode, right? I think that maybe some cultures, company cultures that aren't taken care of as groomed as well, like that could have maybe exploded a little bit more and caused more people to want to quit and stuff. But I think if you have a strong culture, you can handle something like that. But there's also the concept of people who may say, I don't, who is in my place, Joe, as the CEO of WP Buffs, to like say, hey, we're emailing someone that you should, like, what if I had said, or emailing all our customers who want to vote, and I'm going to tell them all to vote for President Trump. Like, I know a lot of my employees would have had issues with that, right? So, that's a valid concern, I think, for folks. But you have some other thoughts there as well, that kind of, I don't think they totally cancel out these thoughts, but it's a different line of thinking, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, I'll bring in an example as well that outlines how, as a general rule, as a society, we understand the benefits of staying out of politics, right? Another celebrity that was famously apolitical, and I say was Taylor Swift, right? I think for many, many, many years, decade? Was it a decade? Taylor Swift was famously mum in 2016. She was mostly out of any sorts of political opinion in the entire time, as she, gained a lot of accolades for her music career. And the thoughts were similar. Don't alienate your customers, right? If she has a strong base of white women that are fans and buy concert tickets and buy CDs, you don't want to alienate them. And, it was sort of the similar argument, right? There are well known advantages and reasons for why people stay out of politics. Another bit that's interesting about Taylor Swift in particular is that she has since started to speak more about politics. And when asked, she said, I just didn't know enough. Right. And I think that that is more common than we think, is that when you think about a highly political United States, you got to realize that it's still close to 50% of the country, even in today's environment, even with the election that we just went through this month, who don't vote
Or can't vote.
or can't vote, who don't vote or can't vote. And so this idea of I don't know or I don't have the right to, so I don't stay in there, right, is well known. And I might start to argue that we know all of that, but we can also pretty clearly start to see the consequences. And I'll draw back to Taylor Swift, right? Because what happened with her apolitical stance? The media and the public started filling in those gaps for her. There is a famously uncomfortable discussion surrounding the fact that those really sort of like scary, extremist, white supremacist spaces on the internet started these conspiracy theories, right? That Taylor Swift was secretly a white supremacist, right? And finding things in the
I didn't know
music
that.
or in her, yeah, super interesting. In her symbolism, in her songs, you know how people are with like finding patterns in art and things like that, right? And so there was this huge
Or
undercurrent.
finding fake patterns. Humans are good at both of those things.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. That's a very important clarification. And finding these fake patterns, right, that to these fringe communities indicated that the reason she was keeping quiet is because she secretly sympathized with white supremacy, right? And so that's the cost that you can run being apolitical. Other people will make up the story if they are curious enough. And then, she had to and continues to be honest, have to do a lot of work to earn back the trust of people who saw that dynamic and were surprised or disappointed to not watch this performer, or this person. And again, I'm very realistic about, I think that it's unfortunate that our culture so much idolizes entertainers. And at the same time, it's a reality. And you see a lot of, especially younger girls, seeing the women that are prominent in our society as role models, right? So watching this sort of role model not, or at least take a long time to publicly and loudly denounce that kind of talk, right? About what might secretly be going on. And so that's where the costs come in, right? Many people, more people now, are wanting to support not just entertainers or products or brands that they consider to align with their own values, right? But actually also purchase products that they see created in ways that they consider ethical, right? So we not only want to see a brand statement about our values, but we also want to make sure that our products are being created by diverse teams and that we're seeing people that look like us represented in how these things are made and distributed. And as it becomes easier and easier and easier to start a recurring revenue business, even the smallest things help you stand out. And in a world full of choice, if I have two things that practically look the same, but one thing is making a bolder and more securing statement about what values it considers important and the kinds of goals that it's pursuing, then we might go in that direction, right? And I think that when we start to think about the idea of why there are benefits to being apolitical compared to the reality of what we're seeing in the world, to businesses that come out with strong political stances versus what was happening when they weren't coming out with political stances, to me, the argument starts to fall apart a little bit. Thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's I think that's true. I'd actually be interested in a follow-up question to ask around, because you kind of have two viewpoints of this, or you have two situations from which you can speak. You can speak one as a former, leader at a small company that you ran, where you probably had more freedom to tweet about whatever you wanted to, or I don't know if that's the case, but you're now, one of 1,000 employees at Liquid Web, a much bigger organization. That not only is it bigger, but we're talking about a self-funded company. Like the money was your Caldera stuff. That was all your like finances. Liquid Web is like a financed company, and so there's another layer of like the politics affecting the financials, which it's not just like you tweeting, it's like, oh, your company tweeting. So I'd be interested to hear, just as like a follow-up, what would you think about, I don't know actually if Liquid Web is like talks about political stuff on Twitter. I would assume not. But what if they were? What if they were more active on Twitter around different political topics? What do you think the experience at Liquid Web, maybe not just for you, but like for the team members there, what would people think?
So we're kind of jumping the gun here, and you're putting me in the hot seat. But
I'm going to take the hot seat also. So if you want, I can do hot seat first and have you think about it a little bit. But you were talking about it, so I wanted to know more.
I mean, let's go there, right? This is kind of what we're talking about. So I'll break into that and I'll answer that question. But I think that question requires a lot of context about understanding who I am, where I've come from, and the way that I personally approach this question, right? And so for me, we did an episode on sort of like our cultural backgrounds as your two hosts of this podcast. And I talked a little bit about sort of my story. I am a Latin American immigrant in the United States. I faced the messy and insecure immigration system as a child. And I grew up in a pretty economically disadvantaged household. And these experiences to me, I remember making me political when I was a child, because concepts that weren't in my school friends' faces, or that weren't in the forefront of the mind of American born citizens, shaped my daily life. And a lot of my politics came of that. A lot of my interesting conversations of racial equity came from the fact that, in addition to those two structural things, I am also mixed race. My mom being Japanese and my dad being Peruvian. And so all of these things came together in me and shaped my experience in a very sort of specific and unique way, to the point where when I think about business and what it means, to me, business is deeply political. Because I've experienced a way in which things that you maybe think aren't political at all can be. For example, we talk about Expensify, and my mind, because of my background, immediately goes to, so how does Expensify deal with it if they figure out that you're using that software to pay undocumented immigrants? When I think about real estate, right, I think about, so how does this particular apartment complex handle the fact that first generation and immigrant college students often don't have the funds for the traditional cosign function, and may not even have parents who are documented. If you are somebody like a DACA kid, which means that you were brought into this country undocumented and then received citizenship through that program, you might have that citizenship, but you may not be able to easily get an apartment because you don't have a parent who can co-sign on a lease with you, and you don't have the economic finances to prove that you would be able to qualify for this apartment, right? And so you can hand me just about anything, and because of the life that I've lived, I can tell you how that business is political. So to me, believing that business is political has shaped a lot of how I've approached my work. I've done a lot of political work, explicitly political work. And then when I was in charge of Caldera WP, we had a conversation with our advisors and with my co-founder where we decided what stance we were going to take. And we decided that we were an outwardly political software company. That we believed that business was political, and that our choices as a small business had political implications. And so, yes, once I sort of set in that, I realized that there were going to be benefits from those things, and that there were going to be disadvantages from those things. Sure, there may be someone out there who holds anti-immigrant views or unconscious bias towards some of the things that I'm saying, which is the more common situation today. And they may find the company to be politically distasteful, right? And I decided that that was a cost that I was willing to incur at that moment. That decision is a decision that comes from economic privilege. Because notice what I just said. I decided that it was a cost I was willing to incur. There are many freelance developers in the WordPress space. There are many new product developers in the WordPress space that I deal with privately who do not currently have the economic privilege to take that stance.
Yeah.
That's how these things fit together, right? So then I think that there's the sense of what you're trying to ask me, which is, so how does that change when it's not you on top making that vision decision and it's you at Liquid Web? Well, so there's a couple of things in there for me, right? The first one is I fully realize that the world is larger than my experience, and that there's gonna be somebody out there who might not like what is out there about me, and that maybe it could come back through Liquid Web. That is a risk I realize exists. And there are two situations there that I think about. One, I have to trust that the company that I work at is going to advocate for me. If the company that I work at is not going to advocate for me, it's probably not somewhere I want to work, given the experiences that I've had and the things that I bring and the approach that I bring into my business. But third, super important caveat, 1 and 2 are only stances that I can take because I'm at a point in my career where I can take them. because I spent the majority of my career keeping quiet and keeping my head down to get past those things. So to me, that's how these two things play out. I think that it's really interesting to be the owner of your own business and be able to set a political direction for the entire organization. I think that whether you do that as a business owner or as an employee actually is based on the same exact factors for that calculation. It's,
Mm.
can I afford it? It's, am I willing to take the psychological stress of it? And it's, does the benefit outweigh the costs? I know that's long, but sorry, you asked me a complicated question.
As a fantastic answer. You'd think after 2 years of podcasting with you, you'd think I would have learned to go first myself, so I don't have to follow that, because that was an excellent answer, and I will have a hard time topping that. But from my perspective, I think, man, I'm still like, I'm digesting everything you said and really running it through, because it was all of that. The context is so important. I think that's what also we need to get across. Is like context is always going to be important. I think the things that brought up to me were, I remember starting WP Buffs, and our first website was like totally crappy. And then we went through, before this new rebrand we did like a second rebrand where we like, it made it a lot better. But I remember that we got hired to work on and manage the website. I can't remember exactly what it was called, but it was like trumptracker.com. And it was like tracking like all of his lies. Like that was pretty much the like concept behind the website. And I remember like thinking like, awesome site. And then we put it on our homepage because, as like a customer that we had, because I remember specifically thinking like, not everyone who comes to this is gonna like want to work with us, and that's okay. But the people who are like, oh, I think that I could work with this company. Oh, now I really want to work with this company because they support this site. Like, I want to super attract those people, and that will be enough to grow a business. I don't need everybody to come to me to grow my business. I just, I need a solid base of and flow of new customers coming in. But that doesn't need to be everybody in the world. Doesn't need to be, billions of people. So from the beginning, WP Buffs like had some political leanings, and as a CEO, it has some political leanings because of my personal political leanings. We've not taken work before that I thought was not appropriate. I think there were other reasons why. Someone came to us with it was like an online gun e-commerce store. Although I actually don't think they were selling guns. I think they were selling like accessories or like firearm accessories. And I'm just like personally not a gun person, which is one of the reasons why I was like, I just don't want to even touch this. Like, I don't even want to be involved in this. It's just like me personally, and I'm the CEO, and we're not funded. Like, I have nobody to tell me what to do. I get to decide. So I don't want to do this. So we didn't do it. But there was definitely also like a legal, like, can you like sell firearm stuff online? Is that even legal? Like, I didn't know, but I don't care because I don't even want to look it up. So yeah, not working with you. But there was definitely like a political undertone. I'd be lying if I said there was a political undertone of like sharing more gun stuff around. Like, there's enough guns around, enough people selling guns. Like, I don't need to be the person, or we don't need to be the company that helps this gun accessory store sell more accessories for firearms. So yeah, I think that it's interesting hearing, like, I think an employee experience is also different than like a leadership experience. And there's also like let's stick to that for now. I think that like one of the reasons I wanted to start my own company is because I wanted to be able to not make decisions based on someone else telling me what to do. And I think at a good company, most employees should feel that way, but it's not at every organization. And there's a factor of being an employee at a company that means you have to follow the guidelines that's set out by the company that pay you your salary. But I know that was something that I didn't. I've never been good at people telling me what to do without me being able to argue or push back or manage up or figure out my own way through that. And so I think that's one of the big advantages of running your own shop, is that if people out there listening, you can choose to be political or be apolitical, and there will be pros and cons, and some may be positive for your business and some may be negative for your business. But choice is like, what do we have besides the choices we make? I really think that like pretty deeply about that. And so regardless of what choice I make, I got to make the choice, and that's what's important to me. I think people can probably go onto shop.wpbuffs.com and see our Black Lives Matter t-shirts there,
which
and
I love.
have seen. Thank you. They're excellent. They're still available if people have some holiday shopping to do. They're an excellent gift. People have seen me wear my Joe shirt on podcast episodes if they've watched on YouTube, or my Biden hair shirt. So I think people probably know at this point what direction I'm leaning. Obviously happy with the recent election results, not with the craziness afterwards. But I think I agree with you in the fact that I think there needs to be businesses need to be built on ethics, and there's a politics of ethics. Like there's something around, like, what do you stand for as a company? Do you stand for making money no matter what? Do you stand for profiting no matter what? If your answer is yes, like, I think that's a problem. I think that's a big problem. I think that's one of the biggest problems in the world. But I
Not only
also
that,
think,
but honestly, like, why are you in WordPress? There are other easier ways to make
yes,
money.
very good point. Very good point. What the hell are you doing? Yeah,
Why are
it's
you
a very
here?
poor choice to make money. Yeah, an open source software. Yeah.
Not only am I
But
judging your ethics, I'm also judging your business sense.
yeah. Double. You're a double whammy on that one for sure. But at the just to finish my thought, I think that there is a trade-off between maximum profitability and maximum, like, average goodness and happiness for a community or for people around the world. And I think if you just dial up profitability, you're probably ignoring some other really important areas of the world. And we've seen that with a ton of Fortune 500 businesses, right? People hate fucking Amazon. We all have Amazon accounts, but like we all are like, fine, I'll buy this one thing. But like, treat your employees better, you assholes, right? So like, but if you're just in business to create profit for yourself, like, are you better than that? I don't think so. I would argue no. I think there are places in my business where I could make more money. We could make more money. I could double my prices tomorrow and probably, screw half my customers and half of our white label partners and probably still make more money because some people will be willing to pay that. But I like to think like an ethical standpoint, and I think a lot of times that's political. So I think that you can be political and you can stand for things, and it doesn't mean you have to sacrifice the finances of your business. And in some cases, I think the potential sacrifice you make, and even the real sacrifices you do make financially, they could be worth it. Could be worth it to stand for something. What is it? What is your cost for standing for something important? And you can always change your mind. I'm not saying you have to believe in something forever or have the same standpoint forever, but I'm saying you should probably stand for something. And there's always a cost to standing for something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. All right. What else do we have on this list? We got some other stuff. Let's talk about actually what it means to like be political online from a business perspective. We have that Expensify example, but let's just dive into a little bit, even for people just who are like thinking about what stances they want to take. People may have been listening to this and saying like, I kind of want my business to take this stance. Like, I think like Black Lives Matter is like an important movement. Like, how should I stand for that? Like, we do things like we have the t-shirts, online, and we have people at our company who are involved in that scene and are involved in that area of politics. If anybody like follows Allie on Twitter, she's pretty outspoken about a lot of political issues. I've told her before in calls, like, I don't control your Twitter account. Like, you tweet about whatever you want to. That's your Twitter account. I have no control over that, nor would I ever want to. But there's definitely difficult conversations can be difficult regardless of whether you feel like you're in the right or the wrong, and what kind of things you're putting out there. That, I guess, controversy, like maybe not even things people could potentially see as controversial or make controversial create a more challenging situation. And a lot of things around Black Lives Matter does create that, because people come around and say, oh, what about all lives matter, or like blue lives matter? And like, I think a lot of people who are Black Lives Matter people are like, that's some bullshit. But like, there's that controversy out there. And so that does create some potential controversy for us as a company. But yeah, I guess I just wanted to know what you thought, as someone who also is pretty active on Twitter politically, Christy, but you work for, a company as an employee. What kind of things can you do, or could you support your company in doing, in terms of being more proactive in putting some of their ideas out there if they want to?
Yeah, so I think that that's an interesting question, right? It's what does it would look like for a company to be political? I think that the most immediate image that comes to mind is
And yeah,
the
sorry, let me
corporate.
just sorry, before we even get into that, there are a lot of companies that like are political, and like, just it seems like it's just a branded thing. Like all the commercials you see around COVID from like these Fortune 5 companies, and like Facebook like having this great like voting commercial, which like actually was a pretty good commercial, but like still like, I know what you're doing. I know what you're doing. Don't try and fake me out. You caused the whole 2016. Like, don't try and like pretend you're a good guy now. But making strides is important. So I just wanted to put that out there, that there's, it's not, there's also negative ways that it can happen, but we want to try and take steps forward, especially as smaller companies, which I think we can do a little bit easier. So sorry to interrupt.
What it looks like for a company to be political is complicated. The image that most frequently comes to people's mind is the most recently available image, and for most of us, that's a company posting about politics on social media on the corporate account. And the most widely distributed thing is a company running advertisements that are political in nature. But being political as a company is a lot more than that. I think a lot of that has to do with the kinds of actions that we take. Um, and I also think that while companies and their employees are going to have relationships surrounding politics and messages and things like that, that's where this sort of psychological safety in bringing your whole self to work comes in. If I worked somewhere that policed my Twitter account, my job dissatisfaction would be in the garbage bin, right? If I worked somewhere where I believed that I had to hide who I am to an unreasonable degree, my job satisfaction would be in the garbage bin, right? At the same time, because of the background that I've outlined earlier and in the episode that we recorded about race, most of my lived experience has been me figuring out where the boundary that I could push was and not going past that. Because going past that means danger to myself, my body, my finances, or the people I love, or the things I care about. I like my job. I think that I'm doing work that matters there. And I think that when people who maybe belong to more dominant cultures or have more privilege, have lived more privileged lives, you see people like, I don't want to say like myself, because I actually don't think I'm that outspoken on Twitter, which is hilarious. Like, a lot of people really strongly disagree with me, but I'm not, because I know where my line is. But I think a lot of people see this kind of people being outspoken and they think like, oh wow, she's being really political. But I think most of the time people are being as political as they need to be heard and to feel respected and to be authentic in the spaces in which they're operating in. I think that in the last 5 years or so, we have seen an uptick in that. And we've seen an uptick in that because we as society are changing. We're creating spaces to let these previously untold stories be told on wider and bigger stages, to be distributed on bigger platforms, and to have these voices that previously were sort of shoved in the corner, right, to come out and take the center spotlight and say what it has been like for the last 20, 30, 40 years on a specific topic, right? So I think when you're a business and you're political, it doesn't just mean um, posting stuff on social media and, posting a Black Lives Matter banner on your on your website or whatever. I think it also has to do with the kinds of decisions that you make in your marketing and your
Mm-hmm.
priorities, which is what you were talking about with the Trump tracker.
In hiring
That's right.
your values,
Hiring
there's a
is a
lot of,
political
yeah.
action. Yep. Absolutely. How you approach your hiring is a political action. The kinds of terms of service that your products are under is a political action. And the way that you create a workplace environment for your employees is a political action, because choosing to create an environment in which no one's allowed to tweet about their political views, and everybody, and no one's allowed to talk about politics at work, is a political action, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because
Yeah.
you are living and operating in a system in which there are certain people that are more affected by issues of politics and race and economic disparity than others, right? And when we think about what it means to be a political business, here's the spoiler and the big reveal of this episode is, as far as I'm concerned, should your business be political? The answer to that question, and I get asked that kind of stuff all the time. Why was Caldera political? Why are you so political on Twitter? Should your business be political? My answer is your business is already political because it exists. What are you doing about it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. As soon as you wrote that in the show notes before we started, I was like, that's so true. Like, it's just we're all on this sliding scale, and once it is in existence, there's a politics behind it. But I think that's a great place to start wrapping up, which is just that everything you said around, like, companies, like I mentioned before, like, made one commercial around, like, something political, or tweet one thing out about something political. Like, that's not really being political. That's like being kind of fake political. Your politics is, I think, a lot rely, or it, the gravity that causes you to be political and pull you towards certain political areas is like what you do in your business. And especially talking to, like, founders out there or CEOs out there or leadership in companies, like, there's a certain way you hire. Does your entire, like, is your entire job, or about page and team page, is it all like white males? Well, that's kind of a political statement. Is it a super diverse group of people from different places and different religions and different sexual orientations and all this different stuff? That's also a political statement. Like, you have political statements. It's up to you to determine where you lie in that. And I'm not coming and saying there are any right answers or wrong answers, but from where I'm coming from, more diverse staff is always a better thing. I think that around the culture you build, yeah, are you creating a culture of fear? You can't tweet that. Well, that sounds like a certain kind of culture that someone's been building for the last 4 years, or trying to build for the last 4 years here in the U.S. at least. So I don't agree with that. But it's also political to say you can do whatever you want to. Democratize publishing, democratize what you're able to say. That's a political statement too. Yeah, I think there's the politics of, like, I guess, okay, I want to finish off by talking a little bit about, like, the trade-off between being political and not being political, because and from, like, a building your business standpoint, I think the strength, or I think the, like, pros are the cons, kind of. And I think what I mean by is that when you're political and more political around the things you do and the way you run your company, you're going to have certain people who give you thumbs up and are like, excellent, I like that about your company. I'm more likely to hire you. I'm more likely to work for you. I'm more likely to tell other people about you. And there are some people that will be like, thumbs down. I don't really like that political stance. I'm not going to want to work for you. I'm not going to become a customer. I'm not going to refer people over to you. Regardless of which side is which probably is based on your political standpoint. Like I said earlier, you don't have to have the whole world come to your company to be successful, especially if you're a small business. Spoiler alert, you can get like a few new customers every month and still be doing better. And it's good to appeal, I think, to a certain population. You want to find your target audience. I think being political actually only helps you find that target audience. If you're not political, what do you stand for as a company? People don't know. They know the value, and maybe they'll hire you based on that. But they will fill in the gaps and say, can they add value to me, and do they match my political beliefs? Well, that smaller chunk is much more likely to convert into customers, I think. So I think there's actually a lot of advantages financially in growing a business, regardless of whether you're doing subscription or one time. Running a business, especially a small business, where you can actually use politics to help grow your business. You can be more attractive to a certain base. Like you said, Christy, earlier, there are a lot of people who they use Amazon begrudgingly, right? They're like, this is fast, it's 2 days. But like, if there was a Amazon competitor out there that maybe it delivered in 3 days, but they were like an awesome company, and they had like Starbucks equivalent, like employee treatment, like that would be better. Maybe in some cases Starbucks hasn't been as good, but they're like, they send a lot of people to college, and they pay more for their healthcare for their employees than they do for the coffee. Like, these are big. Those are awesome things, right? I'd probably use that company. I think a lot of people probably would too. So the value add isn't everything, and the low cost isn't everything. There's an ethical cost as well, and that's becoming more and more apparent in a super divided world. So anything you want to close out with, Chrissy, that we didn't get to touch on?
Yeah. One last bit that I think is important to mention when answering the question, should your business be political, to our audience of a podcast called WordPress Monthly Recurring Revenue, is that I said earlier that you can list just about any business for me, and I can tell you how it's political because of some of the experiences that I've had. I won't have the whole picture, but I tend to have more picture than someone who maybe has grown up with more privilege. That's not to say that I haven't grown up with a lot of privilege. I've always been, able-bodied and straight and things like that. But we are all sort of in different scales of privilege, and some of my experiences lead me to really be able to tell you the ways in which most things that you think are not political because of your higher levels of privilege kind of are for the communities that I've belonged to. And for me, WordPress is a hugely political thing. People are used to it. People are used to this idea of WordPress existing. There's lots of people with lots of high amounts of privilege in the space doing work. And so it's easy to forget how absolutely revolutionary it is that we have a framework by which anyone, regardless of financial means, if you have access to a public library near you, you can go use a computer there and you can put something about your ideas and thoughts on the internet. Yes, there are many other different factors that go into that. There is access, there is economic barriers, there's education barriers. That's a whole other podcast episode. But the core foundation of this idea that we are now living in a world because of this one massive open source framework where anyone can just go and publish things that previously used to be kept by gatekeeper after gatekeeper after gatekeeper. If you wanted any kind of readership at all, you were going to have to figure out how to get a major publisher to publish the words you were writing, and WordPress has eliminated that entirely, is insane. Why is it insane? Because historically speaking, the people who got access to those large publication and distribution networks were people with existing privilege. And so you didn't hear the stories of people who didn't have that privilege. You didn't hear their words. Their words existed, they were happening, but no one beyond their communities really was hearing those words. And now that's changed. There's a lot of good to that. I think that a lot of the movements that we're seeing today are happening because we have more access to this kind of publication. We're also seeing WordPress play a large part in misinformation because what did I just say? Anybody can just put anything on the internet and have it have major and massive distribution. And so whether you like it or not, WordPress is a really political act. And you want to keep politics out of it. You want everybody to just get along. You're wondering why we can't just put our differences aside. And you're working in one of the most political moments of the last 20 years on one of the most politically influential pieces of open source software that there's been in the last 20 years. If you're coming into this episode and you wanted to hear the pros and cons of why your business should not be political, I'm sorry, but there is further examination that needs to go on.
God damn, you just fired me up. Now I'm gonna go do some phone banking for the Georgia State Senate races right now. Yes, I couldn't have said it better myself. That's a great place to wrap up for the day. I'm sure this conversation is far from over. We've got, we could do a 24-hour podcast episode about this and still, only hit that piece of the iceberg above the water. But I think that's pretty good, an hour for today, and touch on some really solid topics. So yeah, let's wrap it up for today. If people want to leave a review for the pod, Christy, wouldn't that be something?
Oh man, this is the point at which we get a ton of 1-star reviews, right? Like, totally terrible political episode. I came here to learn about money.
Stop the podcast.
Stop the podcast. Stop the podcast.
Keep the podcast. Keep the Oh, which one do you want? I don't know.
Well, I don't know. Keep the podcast. Stop the podcast. I'm at the Keep the Podcast protest. I'm at the Stop the Podcast protest. WPMRR.com/iTunes, everybody. Tell us, do you want to stop the podcast? Do you want to keep the podcast? Do you maybe want both?
Excellent. So many 1-star reviews coming from so many trolls. Please, Apple, if you're listening to this, anybody from Apple, just watch out for those trolls and make sure their reviews don't show up. Okay, thanks. WPMRR.com/iTunes. If you are on an Apple device, that'll take you right there. We would love a review. If you're new to the show, we've got if this is episode 120 or something like that, around there. So we've got a ton of old episodes. Go back and binge some old episodes. I know, Chrissy, isn't that cool? A lot of episodes.
We've been doing this for so long, Joe. That's crazy.
So long. Almost coming up to 2 years, I think. Man, time flies. Seems like yesterday we're at episode 1 and didn't really know what we were doing. And now we know a little bit about what we're doing. Solid. What else do we do? Reviews, new episodes, questions. People should send us questions. We should do another Q&A episode soon. Those are fun, right?
Yes, I am a super fan of Q&A episodes, so please send us your questions. You can send them at yo@WPMRR.com.
We will be in your podcast players again next Tuesday. We will catch you then. See you, Christy.
Bye, Joe.